After Dean Kremer's dominance on Friday night, it looked like the Orioles were turning things around in May. And then they lost another series. I'll recap all three games against the Royals coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Monday, May 5th, 2025, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, we are going to recap the Orioles series loss to the Kansas City Royals at home this weekend as the O's won the opener but dropped the final two to lose the series. I'll get you the 5 things you need to know from Friday's win, including a dominant start from Dean Kremer and some timely late hitting from the Orioles offense. Then we'll talk about what happened on Saturday. Sugano was good, but the offense laid an egg. And finally on Sunday, the home run barrage from both teams, but especially the Royals, led to a series win for Kansas City. But that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. So let's start with the positive in chronological order. Let's start with that Friday night win because the Orioles, we know it was a bad April. They finished the month at 12-18 overall, but they did end strong. They won 2 out of 3 from the New York Yankees to finish April. They got the off day on May 1st on Thursday. They talked about kind of wiping it. We chatted about how it's a much easier schedule for the Orioles in the month of May. Now, the Royals are a good team, but really after this Kansas City series is when it really gets a lot easier for the next 2 weeks, and that puts this in context a little bit. We talked about hey, it's time to go, and it looked like they were doing that Friday. We start with the opening series win. Orioles 3, Royals nothing was the final score on Friday night as the O's got their first shutout victory of the season. And I'm going to get you the 5 things you need to know from that one. And the first thing you need to know is Dean Kremer pitched like it was no longer April. It is something we had talked about throughout his horrible start to the season with a 7+ ERA for Dean Kremer. We said, listen, every single year pretty much, he has a terrible April. And if you look at his career splits in the months of March and April, sometimes the season does start in March, right at the very end. So they usually combine those 2 months. Dean Kremer has a career 6.42 ERA in March and April combined. In every other month of his career, that is May on, Kremer has a 3.91 ERA. He is a completely different pitcher once it starts to warm up a little bit and the calendar turns to May. And listen, his issue was not throwing strikes in his first 6 starts that were bad. He was in the strike zone. He had the lowest walk rate, the highest in-zone percentage, and the highest first pitch strike percentage of his entire career in those first 6 starts of the year. It wasn't a command thing, which is nice, and it's good when a pitcher doesn't completely lose his command, but the issue was throwing quality strikes. He had allowed a 12.6 barrel rate in those first 6 starts. That was the 5th highest of any qualified starter in the majors. And what he did on Friday was completely different. He threw quality strikes, and that led him to 7 scoreless innings on Friday against the Royals, 3 hits, 2 strikeouts, 1 walk on 82 pitches for Dean. Bumped his ERA down from above 7 to 5.73 through 7 starts in the season. He's still got a ways to go to get that under control. But the number one big thing he did Friday night was he was able to throw his four-seam fastball at the top of the strike zone, which is where it plays well. His four-seamer has great induced vertical break, which kind of gives it that rising action to hitters. He had his usual solid, 92 to up to 95 at times velocity with that pitch. He threw it 23 times, which was his most used pitch, but he also threw 21 cutters, 17 curveballs, 14 splitters, 7 sinkers. It was a kitchen sink usual approach for Dean and his 82 pitches. But that four-seamer at the top of the zone, and it only got 1 swing and miss, but it got a lot of soft contact, which was really, really helpful. 6 foul balls, 6 balls in play that got him some outs. That was important for Dean. And he was also locating his cutter a little bit better. At times, he was peppering the outside corner against righties with that cutter. That was really, really nice to see. And they weren't really able to jump on his cutter at all. That was the pitch that opposing hitters had been feasting on against Kremer this year. Opponents coming into Friday had a 314 batting average against his cutter. That was not the case when he threw it where he wanted to on Friday. And finally, it was by far the best splitter that he has had all season. The splitter, the pitch that Kremer added in 2024, it turned into his strikeout pitch. It's the way he gets lefties out. Everything can kind of revolve around how that splitter looks. He just wasn't hanging it like he has been, and it had more bite, more downward, more sideways action that allowed him to get more outs with that pitch. And again, only 2 swings and misses on the splitter. He only had 7 whiffs on 43 swings. This wasn't pure big strikeout dominance, but 7 shutout is 7 shutout. Now, no matter how you do it, especially how bad the Orioles rotation had been in April, to start May with a start like that was fantastic for Dean and fantastic for the Orioles. And the Royals clearly had a plan against Dean Kremer. It was attack him early because Dean had been living in the middle of the plate this season. That's why he had been so bad. That's why his ERA was so high. Again, it's a lot of first pitch strikes from him, a lot of pitches in the middle of the plate, and guys weren't missing them. Opponents coming into Friday had a 93% in-zone contact rate against Dean Kremer. Basically, that means when they were swinging at pitches in the strike zone, they only swung and missed 7% of the time. That is an incredibly low number. That is not where you want to be. In fact, that 93% zone contact rate was the highest among all qualified starters in Major League Baseball coming into Friday. That is not where you want to be because a lot of contact in the zone generally leads to a lot of hits and a lot of runs. But here was the difference. The Royals swung and made contact almost as much as previous teams had. But Dean, instead of being in the middle of the plate, was on the corners on Friday. And when guys are trying to ambush you and you're on the corners, it leads to pop-ups and fly balls and grounders and a lot more outs. And that is exactly what happened for Kremer. Now, there was certainly some luck involved. The Royals only had 3 hits, but they had 12 hard hit balls. We've mentioned a hard hit ball on average is hitting about 450 this season. You're not going to get that lucky all the time. 12 hard hit balls, only 3 hits. However, you can work yourself through it like Dean did. And those hard hit balls included a 103 mile per hour exit velocity line drive that hit him in the leg in the second inning, in which he recovered and still was able to get a big second out in that frame, stayed in the game, and pitched 7 scoreless. I was so impressed by what we saw from Dean. He got the outs quickly. I mean, 82 pitches in 7 innings is absurdly low. And you might be thinking, Connor, why didn't he go back out there? Well, the bottom of the 7th was really long. That's why when the Orioles scored 3 runs to take the lead, the bullpen was rested after the off day on Thursday, and it was still a close game. It was still a 3-run game. If the Orioles had blown it open to like 7 or 8-0, Kremer may have had a chance to try and finish a complete game shutout here, but Brandon Hyde made the smart move to go into the bullpen when he did, but just awesome stuff from Dean Kremer. Now, the second thing you need to know from Friday is Michael Wacha matched Dean Kremer for 6 innings. Wacha was good too, similar to Kremer. Michael Wacha, his in-zone rates, his first pitch strike rates are pretty high, and so the Orioles had a similar offensive approach. Go after him early in the count. And also, Michael Wacha has that great changeup. It neutralizes righties and lefties, and he likes to throw it for a strikeout. So the O's plan was attack him early because he throws a lot of strikes, and we don't want to let him get to the changeup, his best pitch. Now, the Orioles got some hits and some base runners early, but they ultimately hit into a lot of outs in that strategy, and Wacha threw only 62 pitches to get through 6 scoreless innings against the O's. It looked like a minor league getaway day, the way guys were just swinging at first pitches and bouncing out and heading to the next inning. But the Orioles kept their plan intact. And the third thing you need to know from Friday's win is that they kept at it, and eventually things broke their way as they rallied in the 7th inning. Adley had a leadoff double off the second pitch against Wacha. Then Ryan O'Hearn on the second pitch, he saw 2-run homer into the bullpen to immediately give the Orioles a 2-0 lead. And the O's kept their plan, and it paid off. This team, among their offensive struggles, they have not been aggressive enough this season. When they were one of the best offenses in baseball in the first half last year, they were one of the most aggressive teams in the league, swinging a lot, swinging early a lot. The Orioles are in the bottom 5 at first pitch swing percentage this year. Their 64% in-zone swing rate in general was 23rd in the league entering Friday. It's just not something they had done this year, and it was kind of hurting them. So they went after Waka, and Waka knew that through those 6 innings. He was getting away with some stuff, throwing some pitches down the middle. And so Waka kind of adjusted after the Orioles jumped on him in the 7th, became more picky, and that allowed Ramon Laureano to adjust, draw a big 3-2 1-out walk to get Waka out of the game. And the Orioles were able to add another. I mean, every starter besides, surprisingly, Cedric Mullins reached base in this game. Now, the fourth thing you need to know from this win is that Emmanuel Rivera added the other big RBI for the Orioles. After the Royals went to the bullpen, Rivera smoked an RBI single the other way with the bases loaded, 99 on the outside corner from Steven Cruz, the Royals righty out of the bullpen, and just poked it the other way for a base hit to put the O's up 3-0. And it was a big swing for Rivera, who was called up on Monday to replace Jordan Westberg, who went on the injured list. And he did start against the lefty Carlos Rodon on Tuesday. He was not originally in the Friday lineup, but Ramon Arias was scratched with right hamstring tightness. And with Jordan Westberg out, like the Orioles did not want to have Ramon Arias and his 121 WRC plus gone too, but that is what happened. And as we'll get to, Arias ended up going on the IL, but Rivera did a good job filling in and got a key hit to extend that lead on Friday. And the fifth and final thing you need to know from the Orioles 3-0 shutout win, their first one of the year on Friday against the Royals, is that the A bullpen closed this thing out. After 7 strong from Kremer, the Orioles got the 3 spot in the 7th. Yennier Cano took over in the top of the 8th inning, and Cano was awesome. Struck out Bobby Witt Jr. to end a scoreless 8th. Bobby Witt was already 0 for 3. That snapped Witt's 22-game hitting streak he had come into Friday with, and the Orioles gave him an 0 for 4 to end that streak. And at that point, Cano had still not allowed a run in 10 2/3 innings with 9 Ks and 1 walk on the season. His stuff looked really, really good. And then Felix looked great again, closing it out in the 9th inning, 1-2-3, now 6 for 6 in saves. And Bautista, who did not pitch the rest of the weekend, has retired 17 of the last 18 batters he has faced. And the only batter to reach in that stretch was an infield single in DC against the Nats last Thursday on a ball that he kind of misplayed a little bit, probably should have been an out. It was like a 52-mile-per-hour exit velocity slow roller. That's the only base runner to reach the last 18 he's faced. He's only allowed 2 total hard hit balls in that stretch. Like, he's cooking. Their first shutout of the year, their first one last year was April 21st. The last time it took them until early May to get their first shutout was 2019. Like, it's been some rough pitching for the Orioles this year, but really cool to see Kremer, Cano, and Bautista combined to put a big old goose egg on the board and get the Orioles a win in game 1. And then they went out there in game 2 and said, hey, we got Sugano on the hill. He's been our best starter all year. We could go and win a series. And Sugano was good, but the Orioles offense was not. Tell you what happened as the Royals evened the series on Saturday. That is coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. Well, that's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. Now, I think the best part about Monarch Money could be it's got easy collaboration. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. And as many of you may know, I've been almost a year now that I've been married. One of the big things that you don't think about at times is how your finances kind of come together. And that's a whole nother thing to think about. But with Monarch Money, you can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONMLB for half off your first year. So the Orioles got the shutout win on Friday night. They turned it around and got shut out themselves on Saturday. Final score from Saturday's game, the Royals 4 and the Orioles nothing, as Kansas City evened up the series at 1 game apiece. We'll start with what went right on Saturday. That was Tomoyuki Sugano was good again. I mean, it's hard to think he's going to sustain this all year, but he keeps doing it through 7 starts. And it's like, you know what? We'll take it every single time he goes out there. Sugano, who had one of his best starts of the year against the Royals back in Kansas City, it was like his first good MLB start. He was really good in this one Saturday, too. 6 innings of 2-run ball for Sugano, 4 hits allowed, 4 Ks, 2 walks, and a home run on 79 pitches. His ERA remains exactly at 3.00 on the season. Just 6 hard hit balls for the Royals against him. They did not really square him up in this game. And, he was kind of a different Sugano in his last start Monday against the Yankees. He struck out 8 in 5 scoreless innings, but because he was hunting the strikeouts, he threw 95 pitches to get through 5 innings, and the O's had to pull him then and go to the bullpen. This was kind of back to the Sugano we've seen throughout most of the season, where he was getting outs early in the count. I mean, his pitch count in the 4th inning was in the low 30s. He was just rolling through the Royals lineup super, super efficiently. I mean, he gave up a bloop RBI single to Michael Garcia in the 4th that got the Royals on the board. And then the other run was a solo shot from Kevin Biggio, who kind of jumped on a first pitch fastball later in the game for a solo shot in the 5th. But otherwise, he threw a lot of sweepers against the Yankees. That wasn't really the case Saturday. The sweeper usage dropped tremendously. The cutter usage went way up for Sugano. That was his number 2 pitch. Besides his splitter, that's how he attacked all the righties in the Kansas City Royal. And then, his splitter was not perfect. It was 2 whiffs on 10 swings, but he threw a couple splitters that were absolutely diabolical in terms of their movement to get a couple of strikeouts in this game. But most importantly, he mixed all 6 of his pitches, as we're used to seeing. Again, it wasn't an even split, but 19 splitters for his most used pitch, 6 curveballs for his least used pitch out of 79 offerings. And it was good again. He was around the zone all day. Now, he did kind of lose the command. Both of the walks he issued were in the 6th inning, but he was able to wiggle out of a jam with a fly ball to get through 6 at just those 2 runs. So wasn't as pure as he got into the game. And again, you might have the questions like, oh, Connor, he was only at 79 pitches through 6, and he was super efficient really until the 5th and 6th innings. Why did the Orioles pull him? Well, once again, fairly rested bullpen, off day Thursday. They only used 2 relievers on Friday, and they know they had the off day coming up on Monday. And also, you could tell in that 6th inning with those 2 walks, and it wasn't like close walks, like, oh, he barely walked him on 3 and 2. I think they were both 5-pitch walks where some of the pitches were not close. You could tell he was really losing it. It was cool to see him fight out of the inning and finish 6, but even at 79 pitches, I don't know if it was mechanical or he had just lost something in that 6th inning, and it would have been a little worrisome had he come back out there for the 7th. So I was fine with that. And the other thing that was pretty intriguing and pretty impressive is he had to sit through the rain delay. Remember, the Orioles and Royals played an inning of this game, and then the game entered a 57-minute rain delay after the 1st inning. Kind of a nightmare scenario to have a rain delay after playing 1 inning. In 57 minutes, you're starting to think about time like, that's too long for our starter to be sitting. We might need to go to the bullpen. Now, the Orioles may have had the advantage had both teams had to go to the bullpen because they have a 9-man bullpen right now. They have a starter in there in Charlie Morton, and Felix was the only unavailable pitcher in that pen. But it was just enough time where both the Royal starter Kris Bubic and Oriole starter Tomoyuki Sugano did return 57 minutes later for the 2nd inning. And it's impressive to sit for an hour, really an hour plus, because he pitched at the top of the 1st, and the Orioles, had some good at-bats in the bottom of the 1st, and then you had a 57-minute rain delay. That was impressive to come back out there and look as good as he did. Now, he did not get a single swing and miss in the strike zone in this game. In fact, he only had 6 total whiffs, but he didn't allow much hard contact, and the O's are just going to ride this from Sugano as long as they possibly can. Another good start from him, and hey, you know what? That makes it back-to-back quality starts from Orioles starters. They haven't gotten that a lot this year, so that was certainly nice to see. Now, what went wrong on Saturday? Well, the Orioles offense just still can't hit lefties. I mean, it is diabolical to watch right now. Kris Bubic, who's had a fantastic year in the Royals rotation, dominated the Orioles back in Kansas City in April, the first time that he faced him. And he did it again to a lesser extent on Saturday. Bubic with 5 scoreless innings. Now, he was one where it was a little surprising that the Royals pulled him from the game at 72 pitches, but maybe the effect of the 1-hour rain delay kind of got to him and they wanted to get him out of that game. He's also coming off Tommy John, which he returned from last year. But it wasn't with strikeouts this time. Like, Bubic punched out a lot of Orioles last time. He only had 3 Ks in the 5 innings on Saturday. It was just soft contact, just 5 hard hit balls by the Orioles. Not a lot of soft contacts, or a lot of soft contacts, I should say, in the zone. He only had 5 swings and misses, but They pulled him after 5. Daniel Lynch came in, a former starter, another left-hander. He threw 2 more scoreless innings out of the bullpen, and then it was only in the 8th and 9th when the Royals brought in righties against the O's. And the Orioles, this is including play on Friday, but not, play on Friday and Saturday, but does not include Sunday. The Orioles are now hitting 174 with a 47 WRC plus against left-handed pitching as a team this year. Both those stats are dead last, 30th out of 30 in Major League Baseball. And Hyde, he went with most of the lefties. Now, Jackson Holliday did sit and Jorge Mateo started. And you got to remember, Jordan Westburg, Tyler O'Neill, and now Ramon Arias are all on the injured list. There were 3 guys who hit lefties well, at least in general. But there was, Hyde played kind of the rest of the lefties. Ryan O'Hearn was in there against a left-hander. You don't see it much. Heston Kjerstad was in there against a lefty as well. And there's been a lot of talk about how Kris Bubic is, quote, a reverse splits guy, where he's actually better against right-handed hitters than he is lefties. That caused a lot of a stir when the Orioles put in a bunch of righties against Bubic the first time they faced him, and he dominated. But a good point was brought up by Jason Benetti and AJ Pierzynski on the Fox broadcast on Saturday. Can you really trust a left-handed pitcher to truly be a reverse splits guy? Like, think about it like this. Most left-handed hitters, except for the elite ones, struggle against left-handed pitchers. So generally, teams across baseball will stack their lineups with righties. They will hit some of the, they'll sit some of their mediocre lefties in favor of even a mediocre righty against a left-handed starter. It's not just the Orioles. It happens across the league. The only lefties sometimes who stay in lineups, the only left-handed hitters who stay in lineups against left-handed starting pitchers are the elite ones, are the all-star lefties, are some of the best hitters in the game, because splits don't matter to them. They hit lefties, they hit righties. They're some of the best hitters in baseball. So, for example, in Bubic's last start before Saturday, he faced the Houston Astros. The Astros, 8 of their 9 hitters in the lineup, they stacked as right-handers. They only had 1 lefty in there. The 1 lefty is Yordan Alvarez. Now, Alvarez has been off to a little bit of a slow start here this season, but generally, Yordan Alvarez, when healthy, probably a top 10 hitter in Major League Baseball. He homered and doubled off of Bubic in that game. And then there were 8 other righties in there. When the lefties you're facing as a left-handed starting pitcher are generally going to be some of the best lefties in the league. Bubic, coming into Saturday, had faced only 39 left-handed hitters, whilst he had faced 111 right-handed hitters, because teams stacked their lineup with righties against him. And those 39 lefties he faced, most of them are only going to be some of the best lefties in the league. So it kind of makes sense that lefties would hit him better. He's seeing a much smaller sample size, which skews the stats, and he's seeing the best lefties. He's not seeing your run-of-the-mill left-handed hitter. He's seeing only the best left-handed hitters. He's only seeing the Yordan Alvarezes, the Gunnar Hendersons, the Cedric Mullins, for example, the Juan Sotos, the Cody Bellingers, the just guys like that who have hit everybody, and they're great hitters. So that can skew those things. And I'm not saying that means the Orioles should play all lefties or play all righties against guys like Bubic or whatever it may be, but it's something to chew on when you think about hitter and pitcher splits. But either way, the Orioles scattered 4 singles against him and just could not come through with any damage, couldn't do anything against Lynch either. And the big-time struggles against lefties continue. But hopefully Coby Mayo can help with that. And the shout-out for Saturday's loss does go to Coby Mayo. Now, I mentioned already Ramon Arias scratched before Friday's game with a hamstring issue. Emmanuel Rivera was placed into the lineup in his place, and it didn't get better on Saturday. So on Saturday, the Orioles placed Ramon Arias on the 10-day injured list with a right hamstring strain. Now, Brandon Hyde and the Orioles don't think it's super serious. They hope it's a somewhat minimal stay on the IL for Arias, but it is another hitter down. And it feels like the end of last year when both Westburg and Arias were on the IL, and that's why Emmanuel Rivera was here. But the Orioles this time called up Coby Mayo to take his spot. Now, unfortunately, they didn't really know they would need Mayo until Saturday when Arias woke up and apparently it didn't feel good. He went through workouts and he wasn't ready. So the Orioles got Mayo to Baltimore as quickly as possible, at least initially on the taxi squad, but he only arrived to the ball yard a little bit before first pitch. So I saw people were upset. Why is Coby Mayo not in the lineup? Because it had been reported earlier on Saturday that the Orioles were at least flying Mayo to Baltimore. So the question was, why is he not in the lineup? Why is he not in the lineup against a lefty? He literally was physically not at the ballpark until shortly before the game started. You can't put him in the lineup if he's not even there yet when you're writing out the lineup card. So that was that. That was a funny thing to see Orioles get upset about. It's the first time for everything. Orioles fans getting upset that a guy who wasn't even physically in the city was not on the lineup card. Some people get upset at literally anything. But for Coby Mayo, he had to get from Charlotte, that's where the Norfolk Tides were playing, to Baltimore the day of. And he got there shortly before the game started, and he was used as a pinch hitter for Heston Kjerstad in the 7th against a lefty. He popped down. He did have a kind of a rough-looking strikeout in the 9th to end the game. But with Arias and Westberg now both on the injured list, Coby Mayo should see most of the starts at either third base or DH, or maybe a little bit of first base for the time being, because Mayo earned this call-up too. Like, it wasn't just because the Orioles were down 2 third basemen. He'd been great in AAA, 252, 346, 523 slash. That's a 130 WRC plus with a 13% walk rate and a very low 21% strikeout rate in 127 AAA plate appearances. And if you take out the first week of the season when Mayo was terrible, the first week of the season in AAA, he's got a 155 WRC plus since April 5th in AAA. Now, some people were upset that when Westberg went on the IL earlier in the week, Mayo wasn't called up initially. Instead, it was Emmanuel Rivera who was added to the roster. And I talked about then, like, the Orioles had said with Westberg's issue, they felt like it was going to be a very short-term issue. And Arias had been so good that he deserved the everyday playing times. Whoever they called up was going to mostly sit the bench, start once or twice. That was the role that Rivera got. But once Arias goes down too, you now need another full-time option. And frankly, Coby Mayo, for the future and probably present of the Orioles, is a better full-time option at third base than Emmanuel Rivera is. So as soon as Arias goes down, you flip the script and you're like, we'll keep Rivera on the bench. Coby Mayo is now our starter at third base. And that is where he was on Sunday in the lineup, starting at third base, did not get a hit, but did draw a walk and reach base in that game. And even if Westberg returns soon, Mayo still has the chance to hold a spot. Even if Westberg and Arias both return soon, I think there is a chance that Coby Mayo could hold a spot on this team still, because Ryan Mountcastle had a little bit better of a weekend against Kansas City, but man, oh man, he has just been and looked terrible this year. And I think long-term, Mayo is the Mountcastle replacement at first base as a right-handed hitter, not as much at third base, because they feel like long-term, Jordan Westberg is obviously that guy with Gunnar at short and Holliday at second, and Arias being good depth. Mayo's, I think, long-term spot is first base on this team. He might replace Mountcastle sooner rather than later. I mean, Mounty's got some minor league options. The Rangers just did this with Jake Berger, their first baseman they traded for this offseason. They sent him to AAA because he had been so bad. Mayo's here. If Westberg and Arias come back, I would not be shocked if Mountcastle goes to AAA for a little bit to get himself right, and Mayo plays a lot of first base. But wasn't enough Coby Mayo to win on Saturday, and unfortunately was not enough Mayo to win on Sunday either. But Sunday, a very different game than what we saw in those low-scoring pitchers duels on Saturday and Friday. The ball would not stay in the ballpark on Sunday, and I'll recap that wild back-and-forth Orioles loss to finish off the show coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by Upwork. Scaling your business requires the right expertise at the right time. With Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and more. Experts ready to help you take your business to the next level. Upwork gives businesses flexibility by connecting them with top freelance talent across multiple industries, including IT, AI, web development, and marketing. Whether you need extra hands for a project or a long-term partner, Upwork makes hiring simple and affordable. And with Upwork, you can find the right talent all the time. If you need help with a marketing campaign, Upwork can connect you with a freelance expert who has delivered incredible results and will continue to do so. And posting a job is free and simple. Within a day, multiple qualified candidates are there for you to choose from. So visit Upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That's UPWORK.com, Upwork.com, to connect with top talent and grow your business today. So Sunday was the rubber match for the Orioles and the Royals. O's trying to make it 2 consecutive series wins for the first time this year. Unfortunately, did not go their way. Final score from Sunday was the Royals 11 and the Orioles 6 as the O's dropped the series, dropped 2 of 3 over the weekend, and are now 13 and 20 on the year through 33 games this season. Let's start with what went right on Sunday. That was Jackson Holliday hitting for some power. He came in with 2 home runs all season, and then he hit 2 of them in his first 2 at-bats on Sunday. First one, 107 off the bat, 374, just cleared the railing on the flag court in right field. A solo shot off Michael Lorenzen to tie it at 1. And then in the second at bat, this one a little bit firmer. 109.6 off the bat, 422 feet, also off Lorenzen. Was the hardest hit ball of his major league career at an exit velocity of 109.6. Another solo home run with a big swing coming off Michael Lorenzen, the right-hander in that game, just turning on pitches and depositing them into the flag court. Really, really cool to see from Jackson Holliday. Not only his first home runs since April 16th, that first homer was his first extra base hit since he hit that last homer on April 16th. It's been a while since Jackson has hit for any power at all. And he also added a single in the 8th inning at 102.1 off the bat. Second 3-hit game of the year for Jackson. Actually, the first one came back in Kansas City in early April against this same Royals team. Also his first game of the year with 3 hard hit balls. He had 5 of them last year. And the first game in Jackson's big league career in which he had 3 batted balls with an exit velocity of 100 miles per hour or greater in one game. Basically added the 2 home runs. What we saw Sunday was the best offensive game of Jackson Holliday's young career so far. And that is just awesome to see because he's been hitting during this span. Like I mentioned, the first home run since April 16th. Since April 16th, Jackson Holliday is hitting 341. Like that's a productive hitter, but they had all been singles except for the homer on the 16th and the 2 homers here on May 4th. 341 is great, but it's kind of an empty 341 when you're only hitting singles. You're not doing big damage. You're not driving the baseball. I'll still take that over a 241 with singles all the time. It's still a productive, nice piece to have in your lineup, a guy hitting 341. But Jackson Holliday, we know has the power to get extra base hits, hit the ball out of the ballpark. And he did that on Sunday, which was great to see. And he wasn't the only Oriole to go yards. Cedric Mullins and Ryan O'Hearn also had homers in this game. Both are tied for the team lead with 7 home runs this year. I mean, quite frankly, O'Hearn and Mullins have kind of been carrying this offense all season through 33 games. But all 4 homers, both from Jackson, Mullins, and O'Hearn, were all solo shots. You'd love to hit them with some runners on base. Unfortunately, that was not the case on Sunday. Now, what went wrong for the Orioles Sunday? Well, they hit 4 home runs, but it was the 7 home runs they gave up in this one. 7 home runs in a game set a new Kansas City Royals franchise record in this one. This is a team that historically has not hit a lot of home runs, and a team that this year has not hit a lot of home runs. Even after hitting 2 solo homers in their 4-0 win on Saturday night, the Royals came into Sunday with just 18 home runs. 18 home runs as a team. 18 home runs as a team in 34 games this year. That was the lowest in baseball. Next lowest is the Blue Jays, who had 23 homers. They were 5 behind the Blue Jays. Well, they certainly caught up to them on Sunday with the 7 bombs. Now, it was a windy and weird weather day on Sunday. That definitely played a factor in some of these homers because Kyle Gibson, surprisingly, after all the homers he gave up Tuesday, only 1 of the 7 homers was hit off Kyle Gibson. Leadoff solo shot by Michael Garcia in the top of the second to open up the scoring. He just kind of hung a cutter down the middle. And Gibson was 1 pitch away from a pretty good start here. I mean, 3-2 changeup with 2 on and 2 out in the 4th. If he just throws it a little lower, he might get a swing and miss or a ground out, and the O's are up 2-1. Instead, it's a 2-run single to put the Royals up 3-2. He did finish the 4th, but that would be the end of Gibson's day. Much better than the 9 runs he allowed against the Yankees this week in his first start, but 4 innings, 3 runs, 5 hits, 3 Ks, a walk and a homer on 81 pitches for the veteran righty in his second start this season. It was at least okay and kept the Orioles in the game. But then Brian Baker comes in because, again, you have a fairly rested bullpen. You have the off day coming up on Monday. Gibson hasn't looked great. It's a big spot in the game. You know, you're up 5-4 heading into the 5th. You're trying to win a baseball game. So Hyde goes to his bullpen, and they've delivered a lot this year. They did not deliver on Sunday. Brian Baker gives up 2 solo home runs. He'd only allowed 1 homer all season. Now, the slider he threw to Michael Garcia, that was a terrible slider. That's a pitch you're going to give up a home run on. But the pitch he threw to India was not a bad slider down and away. Jonathan India hit a solo home run. That home run from India had an 18-degree launch angle. That is tied for the 2nd lowest launch angle of any home run in baseball this year. The lowest was 17 degrees. Vladdy had one earlier this week at 17 degrees, had a go-ahead homer against the Red Sox. But that one from Vladdy had a 112 exit velocity. He just mashed a ball, and it just kept going up and up and up as it left the bat. This one from India was 106 off the bat. Like, balls at that exit velocity and that launch angle, yeah, they go for extra bases a lot of times, but they don't really turn into homers that much. And that makes me think like the wind, the weather, something had to be blowing those baseballs out on Sunday. And unfortunately, it helped the Royals more than it did the Orioles. Then, I mean, Yennier Cano had not allowed a home run all year. He gives up two of them in the same inning. He gives up back-to-back homers to Witt and Vinny. And like the one that Vinny Pasquantino hit, that was a good swing on an okay pitch to the knees. Cano's given up some homers to lefties before, but the one by Bobby Witt Jr., like, I know Bobby Witt Jr. is a star. He's one of the top 5 players in the game, but come on, like that pitch goes for a home run. This is the first time Cano has ever allowed 2 home runs in a game. Again, the first 2 homers he has allowed this year. He's only allowed 15 home runs in his career in over 160 innings. If you're watching here on the Locked On Orioles YouTube page, here is a plot courtesy of Baseball Savant and StatCast of all the home runs Yennier Cano had allowed in his big league career before Sunday's game. And you can see generally when he allows home runs, it's when the ball is up in the zone. Cano with that sinker and changeup lives low in the strike zone. You can see most of those pitches are middle up and they get hit hard. But to Bobby Witt, he threw a sinker to a right-hander, a pitch that generally works incredibly well for Yennier Cano. His sinker to righties at times, not all the time, but at times is almost unhittable for opposing right-handed batters. They are hitting just 222 against it this year. They didn't hit it well last year. I mean, sinkers to righties, they have a -12 average launch angle against it. That does not generally lead to home runs. He had not allowed an extra base hit to a righty off the sinker all year. Now, 3 times in his career, Cano had allowed a home run to a right-hander off the sinker. And this is another chart from Baseball Savant. These are the 3 sinkers Cano has thrown to righties in his career that have allowed home runs coming into play Sunday. And again, you can see middle up, all 3 of those pitches, middle up, not where he wants to throw his sinker. Now let's show you the pitch he threw to Bobby Witt Jr. when Witt hit the go-ahead home run. That is a sinker down and in that with the new shadow zone on the strike zone, if Witt takes it, it is probably ball 1. And yet he got his hands in somehow and ripped that ball out to left field for a solo shot to give the Royals the lead. Again, there's the plot of the home runs he's given up. And there's the one that he gives up on a sinker to a righty on Sunday. Kind of astounding. I think the weather had something to do with it, but also like Bobby Witt Jr. is a freak, but it also tells me this is not going to happen to Yennier Cano again. I bet in the rest of his major league career, he never gives up a home run sinker to a righty in that spot. That might just be how good Bobby Witt is or how unlucky the Orioles were at times on Sunday. And then, of course, Charlie Morton has to allow a home run to Luke Maile, of all people, who was just called up on Sunday as the 3rd catcher, just 21 career homers in 440 MLB games. I know some people were upset. You know, Brandon Hyde goes to Charlie Morton. You're trailing 7-5 in the top of the 8th inning. You bring in Morton out of the bullpen. You're trying to keep it close, give yourself a chance to come back. He gives up 2 runs, and basically the game is done at that point. I didn't mind Morton in that spot. It's the bottom third of the order. It's all righties. You're down by 2 in the 8th. And listen, I think that was kind of the one final chance outing for Charlie Morton. Like they had tried him with an opener above him. They tried him as a starter. Obviously, that went poorly. They tried him in long relief. And I think for the Orioles, it was like, all right, we paid this guy $15 million. We've got him officially in the bullpen right now. We are going with 4 starters just so we can put Charlie Morton in the bullpen. That's how bad he's been. And Brandon Hyde and the Orioles may have just said, look, let's just see if there's any value out of him. Maybe if we put him, and it's not high leverage when you're down by 2 in the 8th inning against the bottom of the order, but at least not a long relief mop-up situation, kind of a regular reliever role in that spot. Let's put him in here against the bottom of the order and see how he does. And if he can get us a 1-2-3 inning, maybe we have something here where we can use him in different spots out of the bullpen, keep him around for at least starter depth. Instead, he was really bad again. He allowed a home run to a 3rd catcher. And that might have just been the icing on the cake. Zach Eflin was good in his rehab start Sunday in Aberdeen. He said he hopes it'll only take 1 rehab start. Eflin might be activated to start on Saturday for the Orioles in Anaheim to rejoin this rotation. There's going to be a tough roster move coming. It doesn't have to be tough. I think the Charlie Morton DFA is coming Saturday. Now, he'll probably pitch in another game between now and then because he's going to be here till Saturday, at least in long relief. But that might have been the last straw where the decision was probably made for the Orioles. If Eflin is ready Saturday, I think that the Morton experiment is kind of over in Baltimore. And then, yeah, Matt Bowman also gave up a homer in the 9th for good measure for the 7th home run for the Royals. But there still needs to be a shout out for Sunday, and the shout out goes to Maverick Handley. Gary Sanchez went on the IL earlier this week. Handley was called up. He made his major league debut in that blowout loss to the Yankees, but he got his first career start for the Orioles behind the plate, hitting ninth on Sunday. Obviously, day game after a night game, so Adley's not going to start behind the plate. Adley DHs, and Maverick Handley is in the starting lineup. Now, he did not get a hit. He was hit by a pitch to lead off the 7th, so he did get himself on base. Orioles, unfortunately, couldn't score him. He was pinch hit for by Ramon Laureano later in the game. But a cool moment for a guy who was a 2019 draft pick, a couple rounds after Adley Rutschman shared Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Year awards with Adley. And it's just, he got to AAA, kind of been stalling out in AAA, then finally started hitting the ball a little bit better this year in Norfolk. Always been a good defensive catcher. Cool to see him in the bigs. We'll see how long he sticks as the backup catcher. It's kind of going to be based on how long Gary Sanchez is out with this wrist issue. But even in a loss, very cool moment for Maverick Handley to finally get himself to the big leagues and start a game behind the dish for the Orioles. But the O's do lose the series to the Royals and are now 13-20 on the year. But there is another off day coming up before the schedule. This is really the easy part of the May schedule. Royals are a good team. They've won 11 of 13. This is the easy part of the schedule coming up here. You've got Twins, you've got Angels, then you've got Twins again, and then Nationals. This is the time to make your move. We'll see if the O's can do it after the off day. But even with Monday off, I'll still be back for an episode tomorrow. If you remember last week on Friday, I did my 3 reasons why the Orioles will turn this thing around after a rough start. Tomorrow comes the flip side of the argument. 3 reasons why the Orioles will not turn this around. And this might be a lost season for Baltimore. That's coming up on tomorrow's episode. But until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.